people talk about self-harm, they're usually referring to self-mutilation behavior such as cutting or anything that physically harms the individual. But those aren't the only ways that people harm themselves. Self-harm may manifest from self-destructive things that don't always look like self-harm at all. It doesn't always manifest physically. It can be shown in self-destructive behaviors that crop up in different areas of your life. Maybe you put everyone else's needs ahead of your own to the point of burnout on a frequent basis, and in a way you're hurting yourself with or without realizing it. Maybe you push people away and you self-sabotage in your relationships as a defense mechanism or whatever it may be, but it is actually subconsciously self-sabotaging yourself and harming yourself. Or maybe you are outwardly healthy with your behaviors, but you exercise in an excessive amount and that ends up hurting you. Now, before I continue, it's very important to clarify that just because you may experience one of these things doesn't always equate that it's automatically self-harming. So for example, I talk about the fact that you may avoid going to the doctors, but if that is a result of anxiety or if that is a result of something that you already have underlying, then that's where you can differentiate whether it's a result of an underlying cause or whether it's self-harm. But the key to really understand whether it falls into an underlying issue or whether it is because of self-harm is to ask yourself this. Often what makes a self-destructive behavior self-destructive or harmful is a whole thought process behind it. So ask yourself what your thought process is behind that behavior, what your motivations are behind that behavior, and that will clarify whether it is underlying or whether it is in fact an act of self-harm. And also, if you do engage in those self-mutilating habits, if you do experience suicidal thoughts, then I want you to please call 1-800-273-8255 or text START to 741-741. I will have these resources available in the comments below. I will be discussing 15 behaviors we don't always recognize are self-harm. 1. Overspending. Overspending is defined as living beyond financial means. Whether you struggle with depression or spending money, this is seen as you trying to fill a void or fill an emptiness, even though the consequences are going to eventually harm you, or the consequences are going to put you in a bad situation that you're going to have to recuperate from, or a situation that you're going to have to face and bounce back from. Overspending is a common struggle, and that can also be seen in borderline personality disorder individuals or people with bipolar disorder, where it affects your impulse control. But if the spending puts you in a situation that throws your stability in open air, then it is seen as a self-harm behavior. 2. Isolating yourself. Isolation is a very common experience for those living with a mental illness. While it isn't always self-harm behavior, you need to pay attention to your motivations for isolating yourself. When you feel those feelings come up and you try to challenge yourself to reach out to a loved one, if you don't feel like you have supporting people in your life, you can always reach out to the resources that I'll have pinned in the comments, or you can always give me a message or a comment and I will be here for you. I'll create that safe space for you if needed be. 3. Having more casual sex than usual. Though hypersexuality is something people, particularly with bipolar disorder, can experience, turning to casual sex more than you usually do may be a sign that it's time to reach out for help. It's also important to note that not all instances of casual sex are inherently self-destructive, but they can be. There's a very thin line, and the key is to keep checking in with yourself and investigate the reasons behind your actions and the motivations behind it, the thought process that go behind it, and the execution of all of those behaviors. So that can be seen as self-harm. It's important to really go within and pinpoint the reasons and the root of it all and how it makes you feel ultimately. 4. Putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own. Now, if you struggle with pouring yourself out for others to the point of exhaustion consistently, you get burnt out of it, you might relate to the self-harm component of helping others at your own expense. This particular form of self-harm, though, can be really tricky because it looks like it's altruistic, it looks like it's high-functioning behavior on the outside. And while someone who perpetually puts others' needs above their own might be truly an altruistic person, it could also be self-destructive behavior. In these cases, learning to establish proper boundaries to protect your mental health is important. 5. Eating too much or too little. Those who struggle with eating disorders often struggle with self-harm behaviors as well. Though not all people who self-harm use food automatically have an eating disorder, it is important to reach out to a medical professional if you are preoccupied about food. If it's affecting your daily functioning as a whole. People with eating disorders tend to take out their feelings on themselves. They tend to go inside into self-hatred. So it's very important to reach out to the NEDA hotline, and that can be reached at 1-800-931-2237. I will have this source also pinned to the comments. 6, allowing toxic people into your life. We all struggle at making poor decisions in terms of our relationships at one point or the other. It's part of the learning process, it's part of our growth, it's part of life in general. But if allowing toxic or abusive people into your life is a pattern, or you're plagued with thoughts like, I deserve this kind of treatment, it might be indicative of self-destructive behavior. If you or a loved one is affected by domestic violence or emotional abuse and need help, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. This will also be pinned in the comments below. 7, putting yourself in risky situations. If you find yourself struggling with the desire to put yourself in situations that will put you in harm's way and that will be at the expenses of your well-being or even your life, you do need to reach out for help. And you can reach any of the crisis hotlines depending on what it identifies with the issue in your life. You're not alone and your life is worth living. And if you engage in behaviors such as maybe going into a dangerous area late at night alone, if you walk in the middle of the street, if you walk too close to a ledge, if you want to jump off of buildings, if you want to do something that is ultimately going to result in harming you, it is a big indicator that you are having those self-harm tendencies and that you do need to reach out for help to get to the root cause as to why you're putting yourself in harm's way like this. So reach out, the resources will be down below. 8, watching things to make yourself feel worse on purpose. It's natural for us to match what we watch or listen to what we are feeling, like listening to sad music when we're sad. But if you find that you're using the media to consume as a tool for making yourself feel even worse on purpose, I encourage you to change your surroundings and reach out for help if you need it. I mean, you don't need to force yourself to feel another way, but if you're feeling that way, try your best to create a safe zone where it supports how you're feeling in the best of ways that will make sure that you feel nourished and cared for, more so than bullied even more in the situation that you're already having to face. 9, scratching. According to the TLC Foundation for Body-Focused Repetitive Behaviors, body-focused repetitive behaviors such as scratching, compulsive skin picking, and hair pulling are rarely engaged in to intentionally produce pain or obtain relief from a negative emotional state, as in many cases of self-harm. Though rare, some may indeed turn to those behaviors with the intention of self-harming. If you struggle with this particular kind of behavior, you're not alone. It's important to just identify the triggers and identify the way it makes you feel and identify the fact that this is something that's hurting you. This is something that doesn't feel good to you. And the key of everything is awareness. We're not in a state, we're not in a zone. This video, everything that I'm putting out there, isn't intended to shame you. It isn't intended for you to start shaming yourself. This is just intended to support you in understanding yourself and in bettering your life in the way that you want to feel, in bettering your emotional and mental health. Ultimately, that's the goal. Never to shame or any of that. This is a safe space for you to just recognize the ways that you may harm yourself. 10, avoiding going to the doctor. Now, this is the example that I brought up earlier, and avoidance can be a common symptom of anxiety, but if you find that you don't think you're worthy of taking care of yourself and you avoid the doctor's result, it is probably a good indicator to reach out to a trusted loved one or a mental health professional, because you are not finding yourself worthy enough to take care of. You're finding yourself not worthy enough of healing from a physical ailment, and that is a form of self-harm, because ultimately not tending to that or neglecting something that does need attention is going to harm you in the end. 11, sabotaging important relationships. Though relationship difficulty is a classic symptom of borderline personality disorder, it can affect anyone, regardless of your mental illness. When you're struggling with feelings of wanting to self-harm or self-sabotage, it's important to reach out to a trusted professional, loved one, or myself. Check in with people who will get how you're feeling, people who are going to let you express how you're feeling, and people who can relate to you, because oftentimes our relationships are reflective of what's going on with us, a mirror of how our relationships are with ourselves. So it's important to see all of that and put that into the scope. Recognize how you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you love yourself or how you don't love yourself, and see how that reflects in your relationships. See how, whether you push it away or whether you do these behaviors that kind of pour into relationships, it's all, the key of it all is awareness. But that can be a sign that if you sabotage important relationships in your life, it is a form of self-harm. 12, excessive use of alcohol or drugs. Turning to substances is a calming, numbing strategy when coping with intense emotions that you may be experiencing or thoughts. Whether you're using substances as a form of self-harm intentionally or not, using alcohol or drugs can cause significant bodily harm. If your loved one is affected by addiction and need help, you can call SAMHSA hotline at 1-800-662-4357. This will also be commented below, so just make sure that you do indicate that and you reach out for help, because ultimately you need to look out for your well-being. You need to take care of yourself. Even when your thoughts and your emotions may go against you, you don't need to be on that same side going against yourself. And do not judge yourself if you're turning to substances right now. Just know that you deserve better than to destroy yourself in a way that will really, really have negative consequences. Eating or drinking things that you're allergic to. Ingesting substances you're allergic to or have an intolerance to can be very dangerous. And this is a form of self-harm because you're intentionally putting something in your body that your body does not agree with and has adverse effects when it interacts with that. 14. Punishing yourself by not dressing for the weather. This is a very specific one, but this is a very real way that someone may self-harm. Though a seemingly mild form of self-harm, purposely subjecting yourself to discomfort due to weather should be taken seriously. It's a huge red flag within yourself that you're doing. If you need to reach out to a healthcare professional or mental health professional just to tend to the result of what that is, or tend to the root that's causing you to neglect yourself and purposely punish yourself by discomforting the elements that are going on, it's very important to reach out to a professional or talk to somebody about the fact that you recognize that you're doing that to punish yourself. 15. Over-exercising. Compulsive exercise is not an official diagnosis, but is present in someone who struggles with eating disorders or disordered eating. According to the NEDA, compulsive exercise is defined by activity that significantly interferes with one's life and occurs at inappropriate times or inappropriate settings. An individual struggling with over-exercising may also continue exercise despite injuries or medical complications. So that's where you'll indicate that this exercising behavior is in excess, because it's getting in the way of those limitations that are within you. It's getting in the way of letting you recuperate. It's getting in the way of you giving yourself space to heal from any medical condition or any injury that you have or discomfort that you have. That's when you know it's self-harm. If you're someone you know is doing that, reach out to the NEDA hotline that is pinned in the comments below. Now, these are unorthodox ways of looking at self-harm because of the fact that self-harm is often stigmatized as one extreme. But it's those little behaviors, those little things that fall into that gray area that can indicate that you are harming yourself. And those things can escalate into more harmful behaviors. So it's very important to be aware of where your behaviors lie within all of these examples and whether there are indications that show these behaviors. That way you can stop it in an essence of getting down to the root cause of what causes you to revert back to this behavior to yourself. That's the key of it all. It takes time to find coping mechanisms that works for you though. So especially because the coping tools are not a one-size-fits-all. You're gonna go through identifying the different things that you do to yourself, and you're gonna go through, okay, what coping mechanism would not put me in harm's way? And not all of the ones available will be form-fitting for you. So it's all about trying out what works for you. It's all about trying out what does support your mental health and well-being. Part of it is finding what works for that person, and different things will work for different people. So make sure that you also don't compare yourself to others in this whole process. Just do what works for you and do what truly takes your well-being and mental health into account. If you're struggling with self-harm or self-destructive behavior, you're not alone. Recovery from self-harming behaviors, it takes time. It's gonna take time. So whether you push people away or you struggle with disordered eating behaviors or you engage in classic self-harm behaviors, be patient with yourself as you heal. Be patient with yourself as you grow. Be patient with yourself through any relapses or reoccurring thoughts or intrusive thoughts or those emotions that still linger around and you can't really necessarily shake off. And know that I'm here for you. I am genuinely here for you. That's why I make these videos. That's why I provide this information, because I want to extend support and I want to extend awareness to whoever may need it, or whether you know someone that needs it. And I'm going to pin all the resources in the comments, and I want you to know that you can reach out to any of those resources. Make sure that ultimately you are taking the best care of yourself as possible. Your best is going to look different on some days. It's going to vary on the scale from one day to the next. But just make sure that you look after your mental health. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great mental health day.